So yeah, basically, just wanted to catch you up. That's where my mindset is at, and I wanted to tell a story and give a little bit of a white pill in the sense that I mean, and again, if don't if you want a purity spiral, if you want to say, oh, you're white pilled because you're not red pilled enough, if you want to do that, let's talk about the Turner Diaries, which is the most autistic Nazi LARPing kind of thing. Like no disrespect to the guy, but like if the siege tards and stuff, the ones who are the most extreme, like no, you're not hardcore enough. Those guys all like what's his name, Dr. William Pierce and the Turner Diaries. Okay, so sampling the Turner Diaries, I'll put a few samples in here in a sec, but basically to summarize, he gives a lot of examples, and I think it's actually very white pilling that before things get better, they're going to have to get worse. And this is the whole accelerationism meme, and this is nothing new to you, but I think it's kind of nice to envision it and to realize that every time that there's this corrupt kangaroo court that happens, like the guy who that guy who ran over the fat chick at Charlottesville, and that whole thing was a kangaroo court. The whole thing was insane. It was like they're all leftists. He should have been sent to another district or another state. The whole thing was fucked up. And you hear a lot of stories like this where Antifa gets off, scot free with a slap on the wrist because it's in California, or like OJ because there's a lot of black people on the jury. Like every time you hear about this, it's very disheartening. And you're like, fuck. But then you also got to remember that this is the same thing that's happening to the FBI and all these institutions. So if things get Orwellian, like they're becoming, where you're not allowed, the anti-BDS laws, and that it's becoming illegal to Article 13 in the EU and everything, things are getting crazy. But the good thing is that they're decaying slowly, right? So it'll probably get worse before it gets better. Let me put some samples from Dr. William Pierce in the Turner Diaries right here.
We had based all our plans, in fact, the whole rationale of the organization, on the assumption that Americans were inherently opposed to tyranny, and that when the system became oppressive enough, they could be led to overthrow it. We had badly underestimated the degree to which materialism had corrupted our fellow citizens, as well as the extent to which their feelings could be manipulated by the mass media. As long as the government is able to keep the economy somehow gasping and wheezing along, the people can be conditioned to accept any outrage. Despite the continuing inflation and the gradually declining standard of living, most Americans are still able to keep their bellies full today, and we must simply face the fact that that's the only thing which counts with most of them. Early last year, we began putting a number of new members, unknown to the political police, into police agencies and various quasi-official organizations, such as the Human Relations Councils. They served as our early warning network and otherwise kept us generally informed of the system's plans against us. We were surprised at the ease with which we were able to set up and operate this network. We never would have gotten away with it back in the days of J. Edgar Hoover. It is ironic that while the organization has always warned the public against the dangers of racial integration of our police, this has now turned out to be a blessing in disguise for us. The Equal Opportunity Boys have really done a wonderful wrecking job on the FBI and other investigative agencies, and their efficiency is way down as a result. Still, we had better not get overconfident or careless. We figured we only need about 5 gallons of gasoline in addition to that already in the tank to make the round trip. To be on the safe side, we bought 2 5-gallon cans of gas from the taxi fleet operator in Alexandria, who always bootlegs some of his allotment. As rationing has increased during the last few years, so has petty corruption of every sort. I guess a lot of the large-scale graft in the government, which Watergate revealed a few years back, has finally filtered down to the man in the street. When people began realizing that the big-shot politicians were crooked, they were more inclined to try to cheat the system a little themselves. All the new rationing red tape has just exacerbated the tendency, as has the growing percentage of non-whites in every level of the bureaucracy. The organization has been one of the main critics of this corruption, but I can now see that it gives us an important advantage. If everyone obeyed the law and did everything by the book, it would be nearly impossible for an underground group to exist. Not only would we not be able to buy gasoline, but 1,000 other bureaucratic obstacles with which the system increasingly hems the lives of our fellow citizens would be insurmountable for us. As it is, a bribe to a local official here, or a few dollars under the counter to a clerk or secretary there, will allow us to get around many of the government regulations which would otherwise trip us up. The closer public morality in America approaches that of a banana republic, the easier it will be for us to operate. Of course, with everyone having his hand out for a bribe, we'll need plenty of money. Looking at it philosophically, one can't avoid the conclusion that it is corruption, not tyranny, which leads to the overthrow of governments. A strong and vigorous government, no matter how oppressive, usually need not fear revolution. But a corrupt, inefficient, decadent government, even a benevolent one, is always ripe for revolution. The system we are fighting is both corrupt and oppressive, and we should thank God for the corruption. For one thing, our efforts against the system gained immeasurably in credibility. More important, though, is what we taught the politicians and the bureaucrats. They learned this afternoon that not one of them is beyond our reach. They can huddle behind barbed wire and tanks in the city, or they can hide behind the concrete walls and alarm systems of their country estates, but we can still find them and kill them. All the armed guards and bulletproof limousines in America cannot guarantee their safety. That is a lesson they will not forget. Now they are all raging at us and solemnly promising the public that they will stamp us out. But after they have had a chance to think about it, some of them will be ready to consider buying insurance. The great weakness of the system is its utter moral corruption. They have us vastly outmanned and outgunned, but not one of their leaders is motivated by anything other than self-interest. They are ready to betray the system the instant they can see an advantage in doing so. Another thing I talked to Henry about is the rash of relatively minor bombings which have occurred in the last 2 or 3 days. There have been 100 or more of them all around the country, including 4 in Washington, and they have puzzled me in several respects, mainly the choice of targets: banks, department stores, corporation offices, but also their apparent amateurishness. For every bomb which exploded, it seems that the police discovered at least one which fizzled. Henry confirmed my suspicions. The bombings, at least those in this area, are not the work of the organization. That's interesting. We seem to have unintentionally galvanized some of the latent anarchists, or God knows what, who've been lurking in the woodwork. The media, of course, have been attributing everything to us, which is embarrassing in view of the amateurishness, but perhaps the phenomenon itself is not a bad development. At least the secret police will have a lot more to keep them busy, and that will take some of the pressure off us. The growth of nihilism, which the system has encouraged for so long, may now be paying off for us instead of for the system.
So having said that, let's talk about the spiritual thing. And part of what kind of makes me more open to spirituality and getting red-pilled on Pizzagate, and I haven't kept up with it. I don't know. People talk about voodoo donuts and stuff. It kind of went crazy, and I just thought, like everything, like Q and whatever, all these people get addicted to conspiracies. Some of them are shills. Some of them are disinfo agents. I think that's true. Maybe not. I mean, again, if the conspiracy is not true, then it's just retards pretending and whatever. But when a conspiracy is legit and it's based on truth, yeah, I guarantee they pay people. I mean, a lot of this has been proven. They do this. They have people go online. Putin will even do this, that they'll pay Russians to, it's like a Chinese actually too. I think it's called the penny army or the 50-cent army. They get paid for every comment they leave on YouTube saying, "Oh, China's the best. We love you." So this does happen. So I don't know. Having said that, it just got too crazy, and I don't care, because there are genuine retards who aren't disinfo agents, who are straight up schizophrenic, and they're like, "No, did you see what Q said? But the pen was facing 25 degrees." And so I kind of got burnt out, and I didn't see any justice, and so I just thought, fuck, and so I kind of stopped going into it. But I still believe the basics of Pizzagate or Pedogate, that I believe the elites are fucking pedos and stuff. I like what this guy says. The artist is Mr. Bond. He's a rapper. He's a white nationalist rapper, national socialist rapper, And it's one of my favorite songs. I listen to it at the gym all the time when I want to get pumped up. And I won't play the whole song because it's not really related to the topic. I'll put it in the show notes. You can check it out. But this part of the song is exactly how I feel, whether you are religious atheist or not.
Why fash? Cause they're killing my homeland. Why do so many of my own people go along with the program? Why are young white males so idle? Cause mom got the balls, pops is a cock and they live without idols. Why they hiding who really spreads AIDS? Why they denigrate the family and normalize trannies and gays? Why does it matter whether Satan is real or imagination? When the leaders of our nations engage in this celebration, why they forcing me to go fash? Why can't we revive the 80s? Why deny a future for white babies?
So yeah, WikiLeaks proved it. Like these people, you could say it's art, whatever, but I do believe these people are sick and twisted, and I think history has shown this, that when people get too elite, too much money and power, they need to, they just like you, listener, dear listener, when you jack off to porn or whatever, let's say sex. I mean, that even happened to me with sex, not only porn, but if you start to kind of experiment, you have fun things, you meet more girls, whatever. Even if you're pickup artist, whatever, you need to up the ante. Drugs, anything like that. It's human nature. So when you're an elite and you can get any girl you want, you can get any drug you want, well, what's the forbidden thing? What do you start cutting people up, you get into S&M shit, you do Satanism, ooh, it's the ultimate taboo, you start fucking little kids, eating little, I think that's legit happens, and it has been proven that there are cases like that. So, well, let me sample. I was listening to, or watching/listening to Sam Hyde's new podcast kind of show thing, and there's a clip where they say hell is real, and I think it's true as well, and it relates to the Mr. Bond quote.
You're like Jared from Subway?
Because that's what he does.
Oh, he looks, his pants. Get this pose here.
Dude, we were talking about that last night at dinner. It's fucking Jared. This is like his wife was parading him around town and saying, okay, turn on channel 53. Jared's on there. And it's fucking Jared like this. And then he got nabbed.
We were actually we were talking about the circumstances behind Jared getting nabbed for pedophilia, because he got recorded talking to his girlfriend, trying to convince her to molest a child with him. And we were asking, like, what does it take for a person to, like, get away with being a satanic pedophile? Like, what level of fame is involed?
It's Jared level.
It turns out
a little bit higher than Jared level.
No, like
Jared level or a little bit below.
But like from the perspective of his wife, he got away with it for a while. Like it took a while for her to report him, right? Like she was shown.
Did she know and not tell?
Yes, for a while, and then he pissed her off, and she shared the logs. Is my understanding of it. So that means that there was this period.
Solid human being.
There was this like grace period in their relationship where she was like, "Mom, I met the one. He's famous. He's rich. He's the Subway guy." And then she'd go home and Jared would be like, "You want to do some kids?" And she's like,
No,
yeah.
Jared.
Jesus Christ. Hell on earth is real, man. People don't, you're not religious. Well, hell is fucking, it's here, man. You can find it.
If you want it, you can go get it. And it's for free.
I don't know if hell is something that comes on you when you want it. And
It's something that comes on you when you summon it.
yeah, it's kind of the inverse of people that fetishize what they've acquired, like they talk about it in gym terms. It's like, man, I'm making gains. There are people who approach life in terms of like making losses. Like you have something and it almost burns you and you want
I'm a hot mess.
You want to discharge it, right?
So this is me from the future, or I guess in the past, coming during editing of the podcast to say that originally I wanted to tell a story about a time that I almost got Pizzagated, or a time that I thought I almost got Pizzagated. I could have just almost got date raped by creepy old gay dudes. I'm not really sure. If you want to hear the story, it's not very interesting because it's just been so long, and there's a lot of stuff that's it's speculation, and I was high, so I was hitchhiking, long story. Not very interesting. I'll put it in the show notes if you want, and there's 2 songs that are related to Pizzagate that I'll put in, but this podcast is already becoming way too long because there's just so much good, rich content and quotes and samples from other people, so I decided to cut it completely. But for the sake of, for the future, so it's somewhat fresh in my brain, I decided to keep it, so I'll put it in the show notes. Ignore that for now, And also the reason I'm bringing this up, I wanted to explain how does this all relate. It's because it relates to accelerationism, right? So the same logic about well, and I think they go hand in hand. The spiritual decay does relate to the country's decay, to the Occident slowly being dissolved, and it is a psychological, spiritual battle going on. If nothing else, just for the sake of morale, okay? Even if you believe there's no, you're 100% materialist. This is a spiritual battle in the sense of, psychological, to try to wear you down with pornography and all these simple pleasures. So the good side, the white pill of all this, is that in the same way that the government, is decaying and it's kind of waking people up, and the migrant crisis, woke me up and a lot of other people more than other things, the same is true with spiritual. You have experiences with this. It seems truly evil. People who are atheists or lean more on the atheist side are starting to wake up. And one of my brothers had said that too. Like, it seems like the Democrats are just so evil. The things that they're doing, like it's insane. So because of this, the crazy, just like the abortion laws and stuff that have been passed, that like late term, it's just, you have to be just a sick, disgusting person. And so even if it is a materialist world, and these people are just, that's just the reality when you don't have a structure. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's making people it's the pendulum swing. Maybe it's the cycle of empires and civilization that, you become too secular and then you become too religious. So, and there's revolution. I don't know. But that's the white pill. That it's actually, that's one of the things, my experience, it was just traumatic experience in general, whether or not it was Pizzagate or anything satanic or weird. And it wasn't just that experience. I've had many things like that. That's what made me more open to it and to think, you know what? Maybe there's something out there, or even if there's not, I want to hang around the people who think that there is. I want to hang around the Christians, And growing up, the people who didn't stab me in the back, the people I can trust, most of them, they grew up Christian. Even if they're not Christian anymore, a lot of them grew up Christian. So it really, these kinds of sick times we're living in, have made more and more normies become religious again. So that's the white pill. And that leads me to Regina Spektor, and the song is Laughing With, and I think it's very beautiful, and it's basically the way I interpret it and how I kind of feel is that you sheltered fucking elitist piece of shit. You've never felt anything, any sort of hardship in your life. Nobody close to you has died. And so you can look down on people and say, oh, you believe in this imaginary sky daddy? You're retarded. And those same people, if they were in a situation where, whether it's bullshit or not, whether I was crazy or not, when they're in a situation where it's life or death, they'll be praying to God. We all, they say you only pray when you need him, that kind of thing. And, it's easy to talk shit in a fucking cocktail party. Okay, and so this is what kind of another one of the things that gave me more respect towards religious people.
No one laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they're starving or freezing or so very poor. No one laughs at God when a doctor calls after some routine tests. No one's laughing at God when it's gotten real late and their kid's not back from that party yet. No one laughs at God when their airplane starts to uncontrollably shake. No one's laughing at God when they see the one they love hand in hand with someone else and they hope that they're mistaken. No one laughs at God when the cops knock on their door and they say, "We got some bad news, sir." No one's laughing at God when there's a famine, fire, or flood. But God could be funny at a cocktail party while listening to a good God-themed joke. Or when the crazy say he hates us and they get so red in the head you think they're about to choke. God could be funny when told to give you money if you just pray the right way. And when presented like a genie with his magic like Houdini, or grants wishes like Jiminy Cricket and Santa Claus, God could be so hilarious, ha ha. So God in a hospital, no one laughs at God in a war. No one's one's laughing at God when they've lost all they got and they don't know what for. No one laughs at God on a day they realize that the last sight they'll ever see is a pair of hateful eyes. No one's laughing at God when they're saying their goodbyes. But God could be funny at a cocktail party while listening to a good God-themed joke. Or when the crazy say he hates us and they get so red in the head you think they're about to choke. God could be funny when told he'll give you money if you just spread it right way. And when presented like a genie who does magic like Houdini, or grants wishes like Jiminy Cricket and Santa Claus. God could be so hilarious, but no one laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one laughing at God in a hospital. No one's laughing at God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they're starving or freezing or so very poor. No one's laughing at God. No one's laughing at God. No one's laughing at God. We're all laughing with God.
Let's get to the samples I wanted to talk about and how this relates to the whole red pill kind of thing. So obviously I'd mentioned before there's kind of a schism in the alt-right or the dissident right, talking about, the Catholics and the religious, and it's basically pagan versus this. So I wanted to give a few samples of things that I thought were pretty good. And I guess the first thing is Jim Goad, who I respect, and I liked his kind of take about people getting too religious and too holier than thou that I'll sample here.
And I remember being a teenager and seeing the right wing as extremely authoritarian and Puritan. And then there was this move where leftists became extremely self-monitoring. The leftists became the SJWs, and suddenly the left was moral. Have you seen this change since the 90s?
Well, over the long arc of my life, I'll be 57 in 4 days, okay? I'm ancient. I'm older than all of you combined. I've seen it flip entirely. When I was a kid, you couldn't talk about communism positively. You couldn't talk about interracial romance. You couldn't even talk about women positively. That was good. I wish that never changed. But they've just flipped the script. And the moralists that I knew as a kid, they're on the defensive now. And they're considered evil just for their views. My problem with the left has always been their authoritarianism and their moralism. My problem's always been with moralists. And all of a sudden you see these neo-Amish alt-right guys that are they've got their nose in everyone else's business. And that's why I did the book, The New Church Ladies. It was Jack Donovan, who's considered a degenerate. He's a muscle-bound homosexual that can probably beat the shit out of 99% of the people calling him a degenerate. But it's he coined the phrase. That's what they've become. They become the new moralists, just pointing fingers. And instead of Satan, it's degeneracy or race mixing. It's you know what, guys, you can win without all that uptightness. I really think you're going to alienate a lot of people. When you make life unpleasant and bleak and not fun, you're going to lose a lot.
It's amazing the dynamic between the moralist and their particular political preferences. Because in principle, you can be a moralist for anything. You might have belief A, B, C. They might be unrelated. And you might just like imposing your beliefs on people, or you don't like imposing your beliefs on people. And I remember an observation I've done on the militant atheist side of the internet. I saw them develop essentially a moral version of atheism where they would try convincing people of atheism.
Right. They're evangelical about it. And they think racism is a sin. They're just as superstitious as the Christians they claim to hate. And
absolutely.
That's always been my problem. And the thing is, live an ethical life. That's fine. I think I do for the most part. Obviously, I've had my lapses. It's when you got your nose up everyone else's ass. That always bothers me, because I've found in my life really ethical people, they're not pointing fingers or worried or, trying to step on someone else's neck by appearing more moral. They just go around being nice. They don't have a need to do that. When someone needs to thump their chest, it's virtue signaling. And I thought the alt-right understood what that was, but a lot of them are all of a sudden virtue signaling about, not being degenerate. And I hate lesbian midgets with 400 piercings and dildos in every orifice. I don't find that, appealing at all. And I understand that the culture is falling apart. It's purposely being ripped apart. And these people have meaningless lives. And I'm against the mass dosing of people with antidepressants and painkillers. Families are ripped apart. I came from a bad family. I don't know if it had much to do with the Frankfurt School or not, but I understand the value of a good family. But you got to take it back a notch or two, because you're being boring, moralistic pains in the ass after a while.
And this is a part of our life that has almost disappeared. But I remember this feeling of being between guys and being able to say anything. And you would know that even if you were to say something stupid, the other guys would not want to moral fag about it and not want to repress you. And they would say, immediately, oh, it's okay. Like they would skip it.
Is that a term, moral fag? Because I was thinking earlier, like morality fagging or something.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Are you familiar with the term?
I didn't even know that was a term, but it's an apt term. It's like, what do you
Absolutely.
care? Like, yeah, just clean your own nest. I thought that was kind of a right-wing conceit, was like personal responsibility and not meddling in other people's shit. To me, that's leftist and collectivist, where they have to burn out everyone who ever listened to a Kanye West record. Or it's like, come on. Like, again, like, think about numbers. You're going to alienate way too many people. And I say this as a sociopath with very few friends and like very little influence, but it's like, just as an observer, guys, you're losing the fun. 2-3 years ago, it was the irreverence. Trump is an irreverent dick and an asshole who grabs them by the pussy. He's a degenerate, I guess. That's how he won, though, was by having a sense of humor and just not kowtowing to people who tried to moralize, like point fingers at him. It's like, I don't care. I'm having fun. That's the attitude.
And before I get into the rest of it, I wanted to talk about a guy, Survive the Jive. He's really good. He's a pagan, and he goes really deep into history, and smart guy. And I was listening to an interview with him, and he said something that really struck me, and I thought, man, he's right on the dot about this. Is he said something to the effect of people travel to other countries trying to reconnect with their own, and to kind of like through proxy, basically trying to fill that void, that empty hole within us, because we've been robbed of it in these multicultural hellholes. We're not allowed to be proud of our heritage, and so we go, and I've experienced that. That's why I left. I was like, wow, Japan's so awesome. If I had that in America, God, I would feel a lot more. I don't want to, you can't run away from yourself. I don't want to blame any of my problems or issues on that, but I just, now that I'm red-pilled and more open to my heritage, I feel such a deeper sense of purpose. I don't know. I just that's my thing, is that it doesn't necessarily, for me, and I know this sounds cliche about like the kind of like I said about the like I'm not spiritual, or I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, I don't like organized religion. That it feels kind of like that, but I do believe we need to believe in something. So I guess before I sample the Survive the Jive guy, let me sample Steve Jobs, and I really like what he says.
The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
So yeah, I feel like you have to believe in something. So believing in something and having like a genuine faith in it, and especially I think it's a lot of studies have shown this, that you need to live for something greater than yourself. And when you have that, whether it's nation, we've been robbed of nationality, we've been robbed of religion, all this kind of stuff, and you're not allowed to even be proud of being a man or whatever. You have proxy, which is football. You watch football. You watch a bunch of Africans with your team sport on them, and it's not the same. It's not the same. And so let me sample Survive the Jive here, because he says it better than me.
Like in France too, the Lascaux caves.
Those are much older, yeah.
That's way back there. But so some of those, like the way they depict like the animals and the bison and certain animals like that, it's like a copy right over. But that what I was thinking about was that region in northern Italy and Sweden. That's very similar,
Yeah, definitely. And those are both from much more recent. They're from the Bronze Age, whereas these cave paintings you see in central France were from the Aurignacian period or the Gravettian period. And that's a time when the entire population of Europe was less than 3,000 people. So it was just a few people, and most, probably a lot of them were living around those caves in France. Yeah. That was probably one of the center of activity. So, and like, they're not as close to us as these guys who did these carvings in the Bronze Age, who were really just the same as us.
Yeah, yeah. Fascinating. I mean, it's an amazing story, and there's so much there that we don't get to enjoy, I guess, to a certain extent, right? Because there's a lot of baggage involved in or has been, and we shouldn't assume that. We shouldn't talk about it in that way. Of course, it's our traditions, it's our heritage. We're part of this story, obviously. But again, every time you have something where Europeans feel like they belong or they have something which is important for them, which justifies a preservation of those cultures, the language, the heritage, and even the biology to a certain extent, that feels like that has been under attack the last 7 decades or so, Tom.
Right. And it's important because it's been shown that children who are of any race, who are taught to be proud about their history, who are taught about their history, who are taught about positive role models and great achievements of their people in history, benefit from that psychologically, because they're able to go forth in life holding their head up high, knowing where they come from, who they are, and that, you know, they have a place in this world. They have a right to their place in this world. And left-wing people know that, because they're often talking about, you know, we need positive role models for Black kids, we need positive role models for Middle Eastern kids, whatever. We need to, you know, celebrate their history and culture. So they know that it's important for a human being, the development of children, but they don't want it for when they don't like it when Europeans say, oh, we're proud of this, we're proud of that. So this is a big problem. We need to have that.
And that is really important. And, you know, when I grew up, I didn't really, that took like my own digging to really get to that. And I remember when I started to kind of getting into the political topics that concerned Sweden and what direction it was developed politically, I would say that was primarily because I got interested in the history in the area where I had grew up. And I headed out into the field myself. I looked at these, you know, the huge, you know, rock formations and passage graves and tumuluses or burial mounds and stuff like that, and started like reading up about each site, how they related etymologically, how it's related to the mythology, and coming across alternative information and mainstream information as well, which really just opened up a different window, if you will, altogether into a sense of belonging, a sense of like, hey, we have something here which is special. I mean, I spent my early, like my tweens, or what do you call it, the 20s, looking at all kinds of other things, like the Mayan calendar and the Hindu things and Buddhism, you know, all over the place, right? And then you realize you have something right at home, right in your own backyard, which is like our own mythology. It's tied even to the people which preceded me. It's a beautiful thing when you discover that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think a similar process happened for me. It's so important because it brings the landscape around you to life. It's no longer just a place. It's, you have a connection with it and your ancestors. And even if you live in America, so you're not, you know, you don't have your ancestors going back so far, you should still be like you should still be knowledgeable about your recent ancestors in this area and how they came to the United States. But just as we in England have to be knowledgeable about our Anglo-Saxon ancestors and such, because I've traveled a lot in the world. I'm fortunate to have done that and met all kinds of wonderful people in different cultures, which I appreciate. But when I see other white people doing that, I often think that their way of doing it is such as like they want a surrogate. They try to live vicariously experience the cultures of other people in due to the absence of a feeling of a culture of their own.
Yeah.
So culture becomes something that they travel to experience, whereas the culture is what you inherit from your ancestors. That's yours. So if you can't, and when I appreciate other people's culture, it's with the same knowledge of how I appreciate my own culture, because the experience you were talking about when you know that this land, this burial mound was built on this date, and the man who was in it was called this, or that the name comes from this word that your ancestors used, and that this man in this mound may very well be your own ancestor, and that the people who practice the religion in this area were all related to you, and that this, you know, you have the landscape becomes alive with meaning of history and the meaning of the spirituality of the people who used to live there, instead of just, you know, an area where a shopping mall hasn't yet been built.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of how I remember that, you know, the teenage years and stuff, and everything was so boring, right? And even the names, it was like you just dread. It was like always it's a rainy Wednesday associated with, you know what I mean? It's like no, there's nothing there. It's just gray and boring. And of course, Sweden has long, dark winters and stuff, right? So the summers are magnificent, though, lovely. I miss them greatly. But anyway, but when you discovered that it was like a historic things of historical importance there even have been things dug up from the ground which has, you know, significant religious significance, and you know it becomes really exciting. and it becomes alive too. It becomes like something that you're part of, and that story continues. It's not something which is just dead and gone. You know what I mean? That the story of both the people, but the tribe and the nation in the extension it's still going. It's still there. You know what I mean? And it links you right back to that past, and you realize that it's just a long chain of individuals that's come before you, and that you're the ultimate expression of that. You're the what do you call it? The preserver. You're the guardian of that to a certain extent.
Exactly. Like history lives in us. Our ancestors live in us. They existed for us to live now. And we're the next link in the chain. And we've got to carry that on. And we've got to honor those who came before. And we've got to, show those who come next how to do the same.
Yeah.
And that's really important, because when people get broken away from these essential aspects of being, like understanding your ancestors, understanding your landscape, understanding history, understanding the gods, or spiritual perspective on being, not just pure materialism. That's what life really is about. That's what makes life worth living. That's what all human beings and all races in all of history have always centered their lives around. The anomaly, the strange and freakish, weird form of existence is this new one, where everything is about the prices of things, the values of stuff, the material worth, and who has what and how much, and whether that's fair or not fair, etc. This and the idea that races don't exist, or if they do exist, they ought not to, because they only divide us, and we ought to all be united under one banner of grayness, and everyone can be a consumer and buy this products that they want to define themselves. The idea that you define yourself in your purchases, that you are an individual, that your life is a blank sheet that you get to write, and you will write it according to where you work and where you spend the money that you earn from your work. This is a falsehood. You are the authentic form of existence for you is to acknowledge who you really are. Where do you come from? Who are your ancestors? What is the culture that you were raised in? That's who you are. And that's how to, and when you engage in that in an honest way and try to honor those truths and your ancestors from before you, then you live authentically.
Yeah, I think it's a fallacy to associate it with, there are divisions already, obviously. And the fact is that every other group, they do have the roots that they cling on to in their heritage, and no one is denying them that, obviously. And it's a great thing that they do. It roots a lot of different, individuals. I think it, as you said, add on to this, we have to take this issue of the emergence of a global culture for control purposes, but there's an efficient way which both market interests and then political, usually left-leaning interests have kind of aligned in a sinister agenda, coalition, if you will, to try to uproot us, to try to make us into these malleable individuals that don't have these links to the past. And let's face that would mean that it's simpler for them to shape and mold us in a way that is separate from any past. It also makes sure that we don't end up in the situation where we feel that we need to preserve something or preserve who we are. If there's no link there, if you're not aware of any link to the past, then what is it to protect, right? That's usually what I realize, that if you don't understand what it is that you have in your own backyard, why would you be interested in protecting that? You don't even know what it is.
If you're not capable of feeling a collective identity, then why are you going to feel any despair for or dismay when that collective group is attacked? You're not capable of it. You're being robbed of your natural faculties of perception, and the most important ones that, when they chop down parts of the Amazon rainforest where tribes live, that it's not just like, for those people, those trees aren't just like the place where they hunt animals. They're like, this is their whole world. It's not just it's their food, it's their life, it's their ancestry, it's their mythology. It's like everything. It's like everything they know is being destroyed. Like, I remember there's a story of an Aboriginal Australian tribe who had this pole that was, to them, the link for them between the earthly domain and the heavens. It linked them to the gods. and one day it was broken, and they were the despair was so great that they just decided collectively that they would all lie down on the ground and die, just wait for death to come. And that's something that should speak to us about how human beings what they really are important to them. And when people are scratching their heads over why are people in the West so depressed, why is suicide rate so high among white males, what is it about white males that's now different from other people in history? What's been taken away from them? Well, it's this natural feeling of connection to their traditions and to their life and to divinity and everything, that we've already spoken about. Obviously, whatever the motivations of the organizations that are trying to take these things away, it can't be denied that they are the results are awful. They're terrible.
Yeah, definitely. It's a crime. It's a crime. And as you said, drug use, just endless other activities and entertainment and escape to try to fill that void, that people lack after true identity and roots and stuff like that. So it's very, very important to become whole and complete. And again, it's like, to a certain extent, it doesn't matter what time or epoch or era you find most interesting or you latch onto, if you will, that directly speaks to you. Begin there and just and read more about that, study that, learn that, because there is something to it. And it's the same way that I remember we can round up the first segment on this here, and we'll talk more about your YouTube channel, how people can subscribe and all that stuff in a moment here. But I remember the story about someone describing an ant. They were learning about an ant, right? And all the different components and the parts of it, and the head and the the antennae and the different parts of the body, and everything had a name and how it functioned and worked and stuff. And where initially you just thought, well, it's just an ant, right, kind of thing. But when this person broke every component down and how they worked and that they had different names and stuff, you realized that it was like a universe within just this little one ant, and all the different little components and stuff. And when he knew the words of them even, it opened up. When the vocabulary opened up, his ability to think about the different parts that makes up the ant gave him a completely different appreciation for it, right? That's why it's important to know, and that's also why it's important, I think, for those who we've been talking about, they're involved in the sabotage of us reaching our heritage and connecting with that, to limit our language and limit our ability to look at this thing. And what is more beneficial, at least in this day and age, to associate them with bad things or something like that, right? It's an easy shot to take that route to try to disconnect us from our roots, Tom.
Right. I think it's exactly right. Because if we haven't got, some people have questioned early on in the channel, like they didn't understand what are you doing talking about, stuff that happened so long ago. We've got problems now we've got to address. Like, what are you talking about this stuff? But I'm trying to explain that what are you fighting for? Like, is it shopping malls? Is it, is it television soap operas or whatever? It's not like we've got such a great history to be proud of, and it's really old. And whether you're talking about things that happened in the 19th century or in the 19th century BC, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to be proud of, and just learning about it is not just accumulating useless information or like tidbits, for like dinner time conversations. This is stuff that enriches your life and enriches your worldview. It helps you to see everything in your life in a proper and real context, because the time should be viewed in this way, like is the huge expanse, the cycle of time, and which we're a part of and that we're continuing for the benefit of our ancestors and descendants.
And along the same lines, I won't sample it, but Asha Logos is a great YouTuber, and he talks about this kind of that baseball team kind of proxy, and yeah, it's great. So I'll put that in the show notes. Control F, search for Asha Logos, like spelled Ash and A. Yeah, so into the sense of identity. So these pagans say that's true identity. A lot of people, for those of you who don't know, they say they view, and I think Nietzsche said this too. I've heard Nietzsche liked Christianity. Like Jordan Peterson will say that like Nietzsche had a respect for Christianity. And then some people will also say that Nietzsche hated Christianity because it weakened the people. And honestly, I don't know enough about Nietzsche, so I'm not going to sample him here. I'll look into that more. But anyways, that's kind of the argument, is they view that Christianity weakened the white man. Jews, it's a Middle Eastern religion, and they came and taught a bunch of bullshit about, don't be strong, fucking turn the other cheek, let people dominate you and subjugate you, and just be a faggot, right? So that's kind of the argument. And what I like, and this comes from a Murdoch AMA and Ask Me Anything podcast, the first one. They talk about Christianity and how even if it started as a Jewish kind of thing, whites made it into our own thing. So let me sample that here.
Is Christianity a Jewish trick? Okay, I want to expound on this theory in my mind. Okay, so is it possible that Christianity is the old world's communism? It derives out of Jews.
Yeah.
Right? This kind of concept of being kind to people, the great equality factor, we're all equal under God.
Well, and I don't know, I've had a hypothesis that, like, if you kind of switch your way of looking at the early church history, if you look at Paul or Saul of Tarsus as a Jewish nationalist,
Jesus Christ,
you look at he went from killing Christians who were trying to spread Christianity among the Jews to himself spreading Christianity among Gentiles. It's almost like he said, this is a great means of subversion. I don't want it subverting my people, but I'll use it to subvert my enemies, the Romans.
But I feel like
because he took Christianity to Rome, didn't he?
Well, hold on,
exactly.
hold on. But is this giving too much power to the Jewish mind and saying that they have the ability to go, we will create a cult that will expand all across Europe?
Yeah, and it may just be me. Yeah, it may just be me getting autistic about looking for Jewish conspiracies everywhere.
Yeah,
not Jewish conspiracies per se, but Jewish influence.
Right. Well, how did they manage to survive in this certain ecosystem that they were in?
And I think, if that were his intention, in the ensuing centuries, it royally backfired on the Jews.
What, Christianity?
Yeah. Because, the whole charge of deicide and all of that kind of backfired against the Jews. If that were his intent.
Hold on. But I would argue to say that his greatest gift, I guess, was that the Christians outlawed interest on each other. And therefore, he develops the whole fucking finance system that gave him the power to do what he did. Okay, regardless of whether Christianity was a Jewish trick, white man made it his own.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
anyway.
There's a lot of Christianity out there that isn't Jewish.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that even goes to show you white man's mind is when they create so many different subsects of Christianity.
Yeah, well, you could say the same about Muzzies.
Yeah,
they made Sunni and Shia and all that. The whole paganism versus Christianity thing, I don't know, just more of that kind of gay celeb drama. But it's a little less gay because I guess it's a good, honest question of what's more natural. But in our current times, one, it's going to be impossible to dislodge Europeans from Christianity. It's just too big.
Yeah.
But you can make Christians understand that, hey, it's not good to let everybody from the third world come into your country.
Well, like I said earlier, there's a big difference between Christianity and Judeo-Christianity.
Yeah, because honest to God, modern Christians don't really practice what they're supposed to be practicing in the Bible, except for the one golden rule of protecting Israel.
Yeah,
I'm like, of all the passages, you pick that one.
They've got this whole, tolerance is the highest value kind of thing, and I mean,
they pick and choose. Is what they do.
And anymore they pick the most cucked parts of the Bible to follow, rather than the part. I don't know chapter and verse, but there's the line where Jesus said, I came not to bring peace but the sword.
Right.
Yeah.
It's you can pick any part of the Bible to support any position, but
they're picking the part that ends in their own defeat.
Yeah. If anything,
They're
I
not
love
using
the Old
Christianity as
Testament
a
God.
defense mechanism anymore. It's they're using it as a method of suicide.
They're being taught that through.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
boomers
it's-
kind of
What's
bought
it-
into that whole doomsday apocalypse version of Christianity.
And there was
They spike it up for that Gibbs.
Yep. There was an article on the Stormer, I don't know, the past week or so, about Christian Zionism and how, the boomers bought into this, Jesus is going to come rapture us so we don't even have to bother dying.
Right.
Kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, of
Well,
course
okay,
the boomers
let
don't
me,
want to die.
Let me, at least in this situation, let me play devil's advocate.
Okay.
The whole paganism, the idea that returning to the roots, I think that's bullshit too.
Yeah,
because
I
you don't
mean,
really
it's a-
get it.
Yeah.
Because it's more than just a fucking costume, and it's more than just rune shapes and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's more of like going back to white traditions.
Yeah.
Is what I get from it.
Yeah. But here's how I see it, fam. Is like they could rob you of all of your culture. But if you were left to your own devices, given enough time, you would recreate the same culture because your behavior patterns desire a certain type of justice. And that's what metaphysics is. It's justifying this world. And you're going to create... I mean, do you think Christ is Aryan? Because a lot of people would say he's not. But I think that's a
He
misinterpretation
called out
of
the
Christ.
Jews.
Exactly.
He always called out
I
type
think
of
Christ
behavior.
was the Aryans' view of Jewish behavior.
Yeah.
It's that you shouldn't do that to people, right? And I mean, like, people fucking use Christianity to be a cuckold, But here's the biggest problem about Christianity, I guess. A lot of Christians say it doesn't matter what race you are as long as you're a Christian. And in a way, it is civic nationalism, civic,
That's if you
religion.
play by the
civic
book.
theology.
Thank you. Yeah. So, listen, but we'll get back to Christianity, okay?
Yeah.
But I don't want to totally shit on it because there's a lot of good things that have come out of it. And the greatest civilization that man has ever known, the Faustian civilization, was developed under Christianity. That was the religion of the time.
Right. You can look at, the Scandinavian and Germanic peoples under paganism. They never accomplished what they have under Christianity.
Exactly.
I want to bring back Greek mythology. That was shit.
I think that might be closer to but it might not be. I mean, the Minoans might have adopted their religion from people that lived in the land of Canaan or whatever.
I will say this because
National Odinism.
this might be
Right.
foreshadowing, or there was like a question before or after. I don't know. The champagne's talking.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Champagne's now talking,
someone
Murdoch.
asked if there was hope for whites, and I was like, was hope put in Pandora's box?
Right. That's my favorite thing about that story.
I
The last
know.
thing that comes out of Pandora's box is
It's
hope.
hope because one of the gods felt
Yeah.
pity. Which I feel like they try to do a lot of propaganda where they say children are so bright. They are the future. They should be making the decisions.
Oh yeah,
Well,
but that's
I'm
to
like,
that's
they
to
gotta eat
dislodge the
candy
whole
all
family.
day.
That's the worst thing to come out of the
Yeah,
60s.
but I'm like, are they
it's
trying
youth
to-
power.
Yeah, this idea
The youth
that,
has some kind of moralistic high ground.
Yeah, that young people have something meaningful to say. And the
Not
older
at
I
that
get, the more I
age.
realize they really don't.
They don't.
No. Have you
it's
seen
just-
them talk?
Yeah, it's just kind of like we're reactionary against everything that's,
Well, I mean,
but-
that's kind of the hipster.
Yeah.
The hipster is the ultimate embodiment of that because he rejects all things. He even rejects the concept of being 100% for an idea.
Yeah.
Like to give your all for something. He
Yeah.
can't give his all for anything. That's why he mimics all these random cultures.
And
He's so ashamed.
I think
of
we
himself.
kind of went full circle in being like rejecting even that. And
Yeah.
it's like we reject your rejection of everything.
Yeah.
We're gonna fucking embrace something.
Yeah, and the thing is, and that's how we found God.
Yes.
That's how we found
Yeah.
God. Was
This
that we
whole
rejected
movement.
this idea that we knew that everything is meaningless, because that's what the hipster, that's his embodiment is. It's meaningless.
It's so interesting how our journey went from like Christian to atheist, and then a little Christian, then to back to like
Wait.
a higher being.
Let's give this story. Okay. So Dr. Murdoch and me, we start talking about God because we got into the alt-right. We're like, holy shit, we've been wrong about so much. Maybe there's meaning.
God?
Maybe there's meaning to reality, right? So we start looking around at religions instead. We go, let's go to a Catholic church.
Yeah. Oh,
so
that
we
was
get all
fun for a little bit.
So we get all dressed up. We get all dressed up, right? And we go, and we enter this chapel. And
cathedral.
Yeah. And we go in there, and there's the sweetest music you've ever heard.
The choir in the cathedral is with the pipe organ. It's transcendent.
It's transcendent.
It really is.
It's transcendent. But
it speaks to the white soul.
What the white soul, right? And we sat there. And for those moments, looking at the awe of the architecture, I said, God, I am here now, and I want to fight for my people, right?
Yeah.
And Dr. Murdoch's sitting here, and he's next to me, and he's feeling the exact same thing. And then the priest gets up there, and he starts talking
about refugees.
And he's like, we must bring as many as possible in and build bridges, not like walls.
Just stick to singing.
Right. That's all it should be.
Yeah.
It should be a fucking chapel where they sing all the time.
Yeah. And we can just go sit there for a little while and cleanse our souls.
If you want to find God, don't go to a fucking priest. Read. Just
look at the stars.
Look at the stars. Look at the world around you. It's like if you actually care about what is the meaning of reality,
lay on the spikes.
Years ago, about maybe 10 years ago or so, I took a few classes on anthropology, and this was the first time I had ever, read anything about this, because I was raised a Christian. We didn't talk about evolution. My parents didn't understand it, and in those times, about 10 years ago, there was this huge debate going on about atheism and about Darwin and all of that, and I really kind of got swept up in that. And so that's kind of, I think, where my leftistness came from, was that atheism, which kind of grew into the whole.
My leftism really grew out of a reaction against conservative Christianity,
right?
Which I saw as kind of largely responsible for the folly of the Bush foreign policy and
exactly.
neoconservatism. Of course, once I realized, all the neocons are actually Jews,
right? And it's not about oil or weapons of mass destruction. It's about fucking Israel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Once you kind of open your eyes to that and destigmatize that in your own mind, you start seeing the pattern.
Right. So about 3-4 years ago, I don't know how long we've been red pilled anymore. And I really think about it.
It all just kind of runs together.
Right. I kind of feel like an idiot because I had read so much about evolution. I loved reading about how we were put together, how we came about, and but I had never really thought about our race as different. That I guess on one hand it was a taboo, and on the other hand I felt like I'd been told over and over there was a bottleneck that happened 20,000 years ago, and everybody that's alive today comes from that bottleneck, and we're extremely similar, and so I bought that. But then one day I read a line about how an anthropologist could tell the difference between a black or a sub-Saharan African and a Caucasoid just by the skull shape. And for a second I stopped and I thought, but wouldn't that mean like their brain's a little bit different? And when I thought about that, my first reaction wasn't, they're fucking subhuman. It was well, there's got to be some type of difference. something. You know, even maybe they sneeze more often than white people. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and once you start reading about sociobiology and evolutionary psychology and realizing that evolution doesn't just affect physical characteristics, but also psychology.
Yeah, the brain.
And behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
every, like, last detail, you know, from the ridges on the brain, you know, the eye socket shape, all of that. But I remember going to evolutionary-based subreddits and asking them really nice questions about, like, well, when did certain things like alpha male and beta male get out of humanity? When did those characteristics, you know, leave?
The Enlightenment.
Yeah, the Enlightenment.
They got so mad that you were even using the terms alpha and beta.
Yeah, they freaked out. I mean, this is when on poll they tell you that get the fuck back to Reddit. Reddit is cancer. Like there's very few subreddits that are worth a damn. But yeah, and so I got rejected immediately for asking questions, and that's what led me to poll. And then bam.
I mean, Reddit, I think, is proof that democracy is terrible.
Yeah.
Because it's that upvoting system that the most popular post wins.
Right.
Rather than the best argument.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, and there's just so much good content with Murdoch. I listened to both AMAs again, skimmed through it, and found all the stuff that's relating to Christianity. I couldn't put it all in there. Otherwise, this podcast is way too long as is. So if you want to listen to everything that the Murdoch crew has to say about Christianity, check the show notes. I'll upload the video completely. And I guess this might sound kind of silly, but the pagans do have a point that Christianity, because it's such a wide umbrella, it does unite other people, and you can kind of weaken it. And to exemplify this, there's a Brazilian guy I heard. I guess his name is Jorge Ben Hor or something. I don't know how to say it, but he's a Brazilian guy. And I heard it in a mixtape I was listening to of some, French and Brazilian or whatever. I didn't know what it was. It's a catchy song. It's a good song. So, but yeah, the pagans have a point, but if you listen to this, it also exemplifies the point that it's always filtered through the eyes of the person who's singing it or listening, or the the biology. So check out this song for a nice little musical break, and I'll catch you in a bit.
Brother, prepare one happy way for my Lord, with many lovely flowers and music. Brother, prepare one happy way for my Lord, with many lovely flowers and music. Jesus Christ.